This video is about what the life of an ADHDer is like, and what day-to-day struggles they go through, and the characteristics of their life, what it looks like. So the first thing we start off with is sleep. ADHDers will tend to snooze their alarms over even 9 times, and they still don't want to get out of bed. They just want to lie in bed and just be cozy and warm all day. They will also, when they're in bed, they will also often tend to daydream, and they'll fantasize about when they're successful, when they have a successful business, or when they are in an ideal romantic relationship and madly in love. The next thing they'll do is they will jump right straight into getting some tea or coffee as the first thing they do as they get out of bed, because it gives them a jolt and it gets them going, or normally it calms them down. Then they will move on to their eating. And ADHDers have specific eating habits. First thing they'll do is they'll go for the sugariest cereal they can find, and they will scoff it down because it gives them stimulation and it gives them a sugar high. They will also, if they're in college, their diet will predominantly consist of white bread and eggs, and that they will find that food usually gives them comfort, usually because their life is such a mess that food is the only escape into finding some peace and solitude. Now we talk about time. Now time is this elusive concept for ADHDers. They just can't get a grasp of it. They don't understand how it works or what goes into making it tick, making the clock tick, because they're always perpetually late. They're always in a cold sweat, or they're rushing, or they're just never on time because they're always on the go. Their brains are going at a million miles per hour, and they can't get them to slow down. They will also often overestimate how long it will take for them to get dressed, shower, brush their teeth. They will often think they can do this in 2 minutes flat, when reality is they'll end up taking far greater time. Another quirky thing that they will do is they will brush their teeth in the shower to save time and become more efficient. Now, what about getting ready? Their toothbrush will usually look like a dog has chewed on it, and it will be mangled and completely chewed up. They will often catch themselves daydreaming in the shower, and they will be again fantasizing and just enjoying the warmthness of the shower, and just going into fantasy mode into their heads. They can often see colors in clothes. So when they're getting ready, they can have creative outfit choices, and that makes them for a good fashion sense. Then they need to get to work or school. So they need to drive. And driving is this almost catastrophic thing that ADHDers have to do, because driving just doesn't work with their brain. So they'll be recklessly driving, they'll be getting speeding tickets, parking fines, all of these charges, because they're just terrible drivers. They've often failed multiple driving tests, and this is actually a hallmark of ADHD struggles with driving, because you have to pay attention in driving, and attention is something that all ADHDers really struggle with. Or if they're not driving, they'll be onto their bus or train, and they often miss their buses or trains by a few seconds or minutes. They'll often also prefer automatic cars, because manual and gear shift cars, they often end up stalling them because they can't handle clutch and the gears and everything all at once. So yeah. Then it's time to get into school or work, and it's time for social interactions. Well, ADHDers often have struggles with social interactions because they don't understand how um, hellos and goodbyes and all of these uh, social niceties, how they work. So they'll often ignore them, or they'll get straight into deep conversations without um, making these basic social niceties done before. They often also can't be bothered with small talk. So they don't want to talk about your day or about how your drive was into work. They just want to get to the meat of the conversation and just have it done and over with. ADHDers will often over blabber, and they will go on and on and on and on and on onto 100 million different tangents. They'll also often be really belligerent, and they'll want people to get to the point because they can't pay attention to them, but they'll never get to the point themselves. ADHDers also have a bad habit of interrupting people, and they just can't help it. The thought enters their mind, and they just have to blurt it out. ADHDers will often always, the men, they will tend to just talk a lot. I'm generalizing about stereotypes, gender stereotypes, but the men will be really hyper talkative, and the women will be um, overly listening in their demeanor. Um, the men will be overly funny. They'll make just jokes all the time. The jokes will just never stop. And the women will be really empathetic and act like therapists to people. ADHDers also have a habit of oversharing, so they'll share personal, intimate details that they should have kept private. ADHDers will have so much energy when they're talking that they will often scare people off, and they'll often blurt out inappropriate things at times. But one of the benefits is that you're extremely passionate and you can give excellent public speeches. Now it comes to spending, and that's another thing that ADHDers struggle with, because they'll be wasting money, impulsively buying things on their credit card when they can't afford it, and they just can't help but buy that shiny new thing. They'll often be addicted to candy and food and sweet things, and they'll often want to buy these things a lot of all the time with their money. And the numerous things that they've bought of Amazon, who seemed exciting and useful at first, but now they're just collecting dust and they're completely useless. If you're a child with ADHD, you'll probably drive your parents insane with the amount of toys that you want, and you'll often always lose your credit cards, phones, and keys and just misplace them because you just are so forgetful. Then comes the topic of work, and this is a tough topic because ADHDers will often really struggle in their working lives. They'll often procrastinate till no ends, and they'll be wasting time just um, being distracted and being impulsive and not getting on with what they should be doing. Most of the times, even the sound of work or even the word work makes ADHDers want to vomit. If only they could get their brain to shut up so they can focus and get their work done on time. They'll often always leave their work till the last minute until there's a deadline and there's high pressure and intensity, and they have to work under pressure when they're great in crisis situations, so they'll do their work last minute. They'll often have a million different projects all going on at once, and they'll have numerous ideas, multiple millions of ideas, but so little follow through. ADHDers will often always avoid work or they'll often become workaholic. There's no in between. And they'll often hyper focus on something to the detriment of all other things, and they'll just be so zoned in on this thing that the surrounding will just completely disappear, and they'll just be uh, so absorbed into one of their quirky interests. After work, another topic that matters for ADHD is procrastination. They will often doodle in class if they're in school. They'll often have over 50 tabs open on their browser. And you're probably, if you're an ADHD, you're probably watching a video, blasting music, and texting your friend all at the same time whilst you're watching this video. They'll often be addicted to social media or WhatsApp, and you wish you could just stop procrastinating and just be and get work done, and you would literally you would just achieve, you would do anything in the world just to achieve this state of productivity. What about exercise? Well, ADHDers will often be always be exercise junkies, and they'll be working out like they'll look forward to it as their drug, or they'll be a couch potato. There's no in between. And if they're into sports, then they've tried all the sports. They're a jack of all trades but master of none. And they'll never specialize in one sport in particular. If you happen to be the couch potato variety of ADHDer, then even the word exercise makes you want to vomit and you just want to eat. Now, what about relationships with ADHD? Well, your relationships probably move at the speed of light. They're so fast, they're so intense, they're so thrilling and so exciting. And that's usually with another ADHD person, or if you're with a neurotypical person, then your relationships might seem boring or almost lacking that excitement that you crave. Sex addiction and love addiction is common amongst men and women with ADHD. Sometimes you hyper focus so intensely on a partner you scare them off. Next is the topic of thrill seeking. ADHDers will often go bungee jumping, jumping off waterfalls, skydiving, all of these to get their thrills, and they will not stop until they've done all of these crazy things. You'll often, with ADHD, find that some people will put themselves in dangerous situations like jaywalking on the road, or getting into traffic accidents, or trouble with the law, or last minute rushes. You'll often find them speeding when they're driving to live life a little bit on the edge. And in college, they probably often experimented with drugs and alcohol and a lot of partying. Now, onto the topic of authority. Well, ADHDers often have a problem with authority. They just despise it. They don't get it, and they always question it. For instance, in school, if you're in school, you'll question your teachers. Why are we studying this, sir? Or you'll ask questions like, "Can you uh, explain what the significance of this subject is?" And that's all to question authority. Most of the teachers you found boring, but the animated and excited and energetic teachers, you found them engaging and interesting. So you paid attention in those classes. Often with authority, you don't want to deal with having a boss, you want to be your own boss. And if you give them, ADHDs often have this jerk reaction. If you tell them to do something, they'll often just say no. It's called oppositional defiant disorder, but it's just a knee-jerk reaction that they have um, to being told to do something. They'll just often just not do it. Next, we come on to the topic of addictions. Addictions are very common in the ADHD population. You often struggle with addictions to social media, food, sugar, exercise, sometimes unhealthy relationships, cigarettes, alcohol, drugs. All of these things produce a lot of dopamine in the brain. And as you know, ADHDers lack dopamine, so they seek out these addictions and they can land themselves into a lot of trouble if they're not careful. Now, what about fidgeting? Well, you'll often find that ADHDers can't sit still. They'll often always be shaking their legs, they'll be chewing on pens, and they're constantly distracted. Next is the topic of reading. They'll never be able to finish a book. They can listen to audiobooks, but the brain will be running 24/7, so they won't be able to listen that well either. Or they'll be website jumping and they'll be going on Google and they'll be impulsively searching for information through Google, which is now their best friend. With regards to humor, ADHDers are often the funniest in the class and the class clowns. They're often the life of the party, but they can sometimes say some offensive things which might hurt some people's feelings if they're not careful, especially if they're very naughty and they're bad. Then that can be a trouble, especially for boys. On the topic of family, they'll often find that the ADHDers, family members also often have ADHD and it's genetic. Um, and the families, they tend to be quite close knit because they need to keep tabs on each other and keep each other from impulsively doing stupid things. Now, on to the topic of self esteem. Well, ADHDs often struggle with low self esteem because they just can't achieve things. They often fail at relationships or they fail in school or work, and their self esteem is often really takes a hit because of these things. And also, the things that I mentioned, it's very difficult for them to fit in. So, they don't find a lot of connection with people and they really struggle in the area of self esteem. But the benefits of ADHD, and there are many, are You are very, very creative. You come up with a million ideas and they're all out of the box, and they often surprise people with what you come up with. You're often very adventurous, you're often really funny, you can be really sensitive, and you're often a square peg in a round hole.
Thank you for watching, guys. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you want more of this content, then please subscribe to my channel.